let's say President Boyd says, I want to add a new XYZ degree from UT. How would that process work internally for you? And if you will, go ahead for the record, tell us who you are, if you don't mind. Thank you.
My name is Bob Smith. I'm the interim executive director for the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. And I'd add for the record that I just celebrated my 3rd month. So
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm still pretty much new to this, but
Okay.
It's given me an opportunity to bring an additional perspective to this process. So in answer to your question, what are the steps? We don't know how much time has been spent on the campus before we receive a letter of notification.
Okay.
That's what signals for us that they have the intent to offer a program. We provide a review of that letter of notification. There's a form that has a series of check boxes. When we see that that's in order to proceed, we send back with a green light. The next step is that they provide a new academic program proposal, which we call shorthand NAP as the acronym. Then they have a rather rigorous set of requirements that they must complete to submit that NAP to us. And those are really aligned around 4 basic principles. One is that they must align with the state master plan for higher education and institutional mission. That's the planning dimension of that. It must satisfy a need through workforce data, whether that be local, regional support, or student interest. It must demonstrate that the campus has capacity to offer the program. That is, they have sufficient resources to deliver the program, and they have the financial wherewithal to be able to support the program. That's the accountability dimension. And then we review that in assurance that there's no unnecessary duplication or proliferation of programs in institutions that may be offering either the identical or similar. And that's the stewardship to make sure that the state resources are reviewed, are protected. During that NAP process, in order to bring a recognition that once we've approved the program, then it's good to go, because there's very little actions that we have the authority to deal with following that step. We require an outside reviewer, a professional in this area, to offer an opinion. The campuses respond to that. When those responses are completed, we then recommend to the commission for approval of the program, and the program is approved by the THEC commission.
Okay, thank you. So let's kind of go back long before I was blessed to be a member of the Tennessee General Assembly. There were times where, or there was a perception that certain degrees were only being delivered in certain schools because there was a limited number of persons. For instance, one would argue if you wanted to get a civil engineer, it had to be from UT, Tennessee Tech, or Memphis. That was it. And now we have engineering departments all across the state. So I guess the question, has anything really, but we've seen more and more, and particularly in the engineering fields, more and more schools add not just mechanical and structural and civil, or on their civil, but structural, and then you have mechanical engineering, and then things as it relates to process. When someone wants to add, say, a similar service where they already have the facilities, is that process followed the same way that the process would be if it were an altogether new entity?
When the letter of notification is received and we've approved it, we post it for public review. The campuses do a very good job of scanning that to see what's out there coming from the other institutions.
Mm-hmm.
And if they believe that there is a reason to object to that program, wherever it is, because you're right, we don't have regional boundaries for programs. And given the nature of the changes in higher education with online learning and various missions, some of which are regional, some of which, such as the University of Tennessee, are statewide, it makes no sense anymore to stay that direction. But when a program receives an objection, we notify the proposing campus that they must respond to that and have a response prepared directly in nature. And we've got a case of that going on right now.
Okay, so how much of an involvement does the outside reviewer have in that delivery? When you mean an outside reviewer as it relates to the map, are you saying someone that's not in THEC's office, but there are other members of the higher education group around the state, or are you going outside of Tennessee to do that?
Yeah, we go nationally.
Okay.
And in cooperation with the institution. That person doesn't decide anything. They just give us a professional interpretation based upon their expertise of the viability of the program.
You mentioned previously that the geographical bounds no longer exist. I can see the need for that, particularly when we have, just in the automotive industry alone, we have so many OEMs in the state. They're, as my grandmother would say, they're strode out all over the state. And so it's a really important, I guess the question is even though those don't exist, the THEC's responsibility is to make sure that those individual identities are preserved. When you look at individual institutions in the state as it relates to the degrees that they're delivering, is there an identity that's kind of associated with that, or have those identities from a campus perspective not the same as they once were?
Well, one of the criterions is that it meets the institution's mission, and those that are more highly aligned with that specific mission are seen more favorable to the program being proposed. Many of our institutions have continued to evolve, and I would suggest that Tennessee Tech is one of those. Mm-hmm. In which it is more comprehensive than it was, say, 20, 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. And that's been of great service to the plateau and to the area. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I would say their initiative in rural development has been a great example of how they've continued to broaden their mission in greater service to the area that they serve.
Okay, just a couple more questions, and I'm going to ask President Boyd to follow up. But for the record, I did not pay him to say that about Tennessee Tech University, but not even a cup of coffee. But I will say, as it relates, can you give me an idea across the THEC landscape as it relates to these degree expansions, if you will, from those? Can you give me an idea of like the approximate number that you would have on an annual basis? How many people are involved with reviewing those, and what percentage of those are denied? And it doesn't have to be exact. I'm just wondering, are we denying people at all, or are we pretty free with that?
No, we're denying people. Mm-hmm. Usually, it's by mutual agreement, and they withdraw the program. And that's based upon the review, and after they've gone through it, we've had any number of programs that have basically voluntarily withdrawn. Now, we cannot deny a program once it's been approved. Mm-hmm. We can come back to that as a separate question. I'm going to yield to our Chief Academic Officer, Julie Roberts, because although she started in this position in the summer, she can give you a better idea of the counts. But my estimate is we have about as many new programs as we have closed programs during the course of any given academic year.
Okay. Just State your name just for the record, if you don't mind.
Julie Roberts, Chief Academic Officer, THEC. To your question around number of programs, we usually have around 25 in our pipeline at any given time that we're working at some stage of the process, from that letter of notification through commission approval. And of those, I have a team of 3 directors of academic affairs here at THEC, which we've been building up since I started in August. And so they're working at different stages of that with different campuses at any given time. They have a handful of those programs.
So just to clarify, it's about 25 requests from a vast array of number of campuses across the state. Okay. And based upon your experience, and I know it sounds like it's limited from August, but would you say what percentage of those do you think are denied or those that are approved?
And I have been at THEC since 2018
Oh,
as
okay.
associate chief. So I have seen things.
Yeah.
So I would say we work, as Bob mentioned earlier, we work with them throughout the process. And so a lot of times they evolve. And so I would say that's a hard question. So that's why I'm kind of thinking it through.
Well, if you had 25, would you say 5 of them are denied or 20 of them are and 20 are approved? Or would you say it's more like a 50-50 split? Or
I would say it's definitely the majority of them make it across the finish line in some form or fashion. Now, they may look very different by the time we get to the end of that process, depending on external review or if they've reconceptualized things. Sometimes they change based on feedback from other campuses around unnecessary duplication, trying to make them more distinctive, that kind of thing. So the short answer is the majority make it to the end of that process.
Okay, thank you. President Boyd, just as a follow-up there, obviously as the president of multiple institutions, there's obviously, I guess you could say you have your hands in a couple of pieces of pie or a couple of pies. Tell us from your perspective what it's like and what the process is for you and your advisory board and UT board as it relates to saying, okay, we think we want to add XYZ program.
Thank you, Chairman Williams. So for the record, Randy Boyd, President of the University of Tennessee, and I'm going to dial a friend and ask Vice President of Academic Affairs and Student Success, Bernie Savries, to come up and walk you through a really great flow chart that he prepared for me in this today. It's a flow chart that we can share with you that kind of makes it really clear at a glance, the 8 steps that he identified that we have to follow through the process. But before he makes his way up here, I'll make maybe just two.
I have a copy that someone sent me earlier, so I'm going to have them print some copies and try to distribute to the members so they can have some visual in front of them, if that's the case.
Well, that'll be great. If I could stall while he's printing and maybe share just a couple of quick thoughts on this topic. One, just to say that our campuses, ours, the University of Tennessee's, and I think I could speak for all the LGIs as well. We want to be responsive to market demand, and we're very close to the market. If you're UT Chattanooga and you're talking to Volkswagen, which is an actual thing, and they're explaining to you the type of skills that they need, we're trying to develop programs to meet their needs. I think this is true across the state with all of our campuses. And so we're very close to the customer. We're creating programs that are in high demand. It's not something that we just do for the academic enjoyment of it. And we're also economic organizations. We're trying to do things that make money, that pay for themselves. We may not make a profit, but we're trying to at least make sure that we're not creating programs that don't have any economic value. So we're close to the customer. We're doing things on a very economic driven basis. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. The second thing, and Bernie will talk about the existing state, I think, of exactly the 8 steps in the flow chart. But I think one of the things that we're doing right now, and something that I think we need to look at throughout the process, is finding ways to reimagine how we do it. It's not enough just to come here and report to you how we do things now, but how could we do them differently? Here's one example of just a conversation we were having this morning. If you look at our flow chart, one of the things that takes time is waiting for our board of trustees to approve a new program. There's a couple of spots where the board has to approve, and our board only meets 3 times a year. And so if your timing is bad, you could end up having an unnecessary 3 or 4 months additional wait for a board meeting. So this morning we've been discussing having board meetings either on a called basis or maybe on a regular monthly basis. But we did just think things like that where we can cut out some of these processes. Board meetings we don't necessarily have to always wait on a board meeting that's 3 or 4 months away. And so we're in the process, and we'll be working with our friends at THEC, to try to reimagine the process so we can take some of these steps out. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Vice President Savarese. Introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you.
Hello, Chairman Bernie Savarese, Acting Vice President for Academic Affairs and Student Success for the UT system.
Thank you. They're going to go ahead and they're printing those, probably waiting on the printer warm up since it's Monday afternoon. No one's printed anything back there yet. So they'll bring those back out in a second. But if you want to go ahead and begin your discussion, you can. I will say, just as a follow-up to what President Boyd said, so if you're only having 3 board meetings a year, and let's say you've had your January board meeting, and then you get contacted by an employer, and it's May, I guess would be the case. If it's May, is there a deadline for where you have to submit those for a certain calendar year? Or is, for instance, if you wanted to change a degree delivery that you wanted to do, say next year in the fall of 24, the question is there a deadline when you need to submit that in order to get it approved for that school year?
I'd say yes, there are a number of steps and deadlines all throughout the process. And I'll kind of walk through this, but I think what we found for us is on average, it takes about 12 to 15 months from the letter of notification process through the end board and then commission approval. So as we're thinking about responding to market demands, that's something that we think about. How do we get ahead of that 12 to 15 month timeline to meet all those steps along the way?
How many months prior? Well, that's from when you deliver the document to THEC. How many months leading up to that is involved in the process that you have saying, do we even want to propose this new degree delivery?
Yeah, well, I think our campuses are thinking about that all the time. Our chief academic officers, our deans and department chairs thinking about what's best and how do they meet the demands in the market. And once they feel like they have a degree offering that really will be distinctive and need to come forward, that might take 1 to 2 months to really get those pieces ready and lined up, to have those documents ready to begin that process, to then engage with our colleagues at THEC.
All right. Well, I think that's one of the reasons for the discussion really is to find out if we do have, and of course, ironically, I think one of the first people other than economic and community development that people talk to are our institutions of higher learning when it comes to whether or not they're trying to determine whether they want to choose Tennessee to grow or start or relocate their business. And so I think it's interesting to be able to know, as many of you may know, I'm in the construction business. Typically, from original design to fulfillment and delivery of equipment, it's going to take you somewhere around 14, 16 months. So if depending on the size of the project, obviously, manufacturing, that would be the case. But the point in saying that is that the goal would be so that the process, when they choose to come here, the goal would be the process so that when they begin to be operational, traditionally 3 to 4 months before they actually open the facilities, typically when they want to start training employees and hiring employees that have this specific delivery of degree or certificate in mind. And so they try to do that ahead of time. Would you say that if that's been your experience, and would you say that speeding up that process or finding another way to do it would improve outcomes or make us more competitive, if you will, as it relates to the market?
I would say it absolutely makes us more competitive the quicker we are to be able to train our workers. Volkswagen came to us and said they needed a new degree in battery technology. I'm just making that up, which is could be a thing because now their technology is evolving, and they wanted to start hiring people in the fall of 2024. We'd be really hard pressed to be able to get a program up and running between now and then. So we want to be able to act quickly, not just for new customers coming or partners coming in, but for existing companies like Volkswagen who are transitioning to new technology.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. You can go ahead and start with the flow chart. Looks like they have them here. We're going to go ahead and distribute those to the members, but you recognize.
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
And some of this will mirror what Dr. Smith has already mentioned, but I want to just walk you through. So from our point of view, that first step is submit the letter of notification to the Director of Academic Affairs at THEC. And from there, THEC posts that final letter of notification, as Dr. Smith said, for others to provide comments. After that, they develop the letter of notification into an academic program proposal. So the LON turns into that NAP that he referenced, the new academic program proposal. From there, the Director of Academic Affairs submits final proposal to THEC and external reviewers. And from there, we have the opportunity potentially for a site visit, and that is where THEC and others come to the campus to work through the details of the program. After that, feedback proposal modified per feedback from external reviewers report and from THEC. So we receive that feedback and then modify as needed. From there, there's a presentation to our Board of Trustees for approval. And there, after that, then the final presentation and approval to the THEC Commission. So that kind of walks you through that process. And as I noted, that typically takes anywhere from 12 to 15 months on average. And happy to talk about any of the pieces and parts of that step if you have any questions.
Yes, the chair lady was going to ask a question, then I have one too, but she probably is going to ask my question. Go ahead, chair lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you for the graph. It would be really helpful if there were some sorts of timelines associated with, the time between step 1 and 2, 2 and 3, and so forth. And I apologize, I was in another meeting, so I'm late. So you may have explained this and I just didn't hear it. But the 12 to 14 or 15 months that you just mentioned, that's to get the program approved.
That's correct.
So there's still going to be time at the university. You have to hire professors. You have to, so how long from the time that this process starts do you actually have a class with these people, with students in that degree?
Right. So typically there's that front end of the process where the campus is developing the proposal. And then on the back end, it could take maybe, let's say, 3 to 6 months if we're moving quickly to then get that program off the ground. We have certain requirements around how quickly we can market the program and get that information out to students as well. We can't do that before the program is approved. And so it's approved, then we can market, then we can begin to organize ourselves to begin having that program available. It could take 3 to 6 months if we're moving quickly.
So we're basically looking at a 2-year period from start to actually having a student enrolled. And to the chairman's point, I think business moves a lot faster than that. So I guess I would be interested in any places that you can see. President Boyd mentioned, that having a different model for board meetings to move approvals there more quickly. But I would be real interested in knowing where there are places that we can collapse the timeline, both here and then at the university, to get those degree programs up and rolling.
Thank you. I think one of the questions you always have is the more, I guess, stops of the train you can eliminate, the quicker you usually get to the destination. I guess based from your view, based upon the current process that you've laid out so well here with this roadmap, are there a place here that you think that we could shorten or eliminate from your perspective as it relates to how the approval process goes from UT's perspective, I suppose?
Yeah, I think we'd always love to confer with our colleagues across not only our system but the campuses. I think there are probably a lot of really great ideas out there, and of course our colleagues at THEC as well. I think something we've spoken about it internally, right, is the potential to have a more consolidated process at the front end. Right now, we do a letter of notification, and then that notification of new academic programs, the LON and the NAPP, right? Could there be some efficiencies found there in that part of the process? Are there ways we could work more quickly on our campuses? Are there ways that we could partner with THEC to do those pieces as well? So I think I'd love to talk to my colleagues. I'm sure there are a lot of really wonderful ideas in addition to what we have begun to talk about locally as well. Thank you.
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
And to that end, I mean, I understand that the university is not going to, or any university is not going to want to put a lot of time and effort into it until they are fairly certain that there's going to be an approval. But is there any place here that you could get some sort of preliminary approval that will let these processes overlap so that it wasn't all linear?
I'd say we would hope so, but it'll be something that we're going to have to work with our colleagues at THEC to be able to say yes to.
Well, that's a good question, I guess. For THEC, would there be a process to kind of re-ask the question in a different form to you guys? Is there a place where along this process, maybe I just pick a campus visit where your final approval process and their initial startup process can run concurrently instead of end to end, with the idea of being able to compress the schedule, knowing that if they chose to do that, that the liability obviously would be on the institution if they chose not to do it or it ended up not getting approval. Is that something that you have discussed or thought about internally, or is that a process that says no, we don't think that works? We like to stop every stop of the train right now, and we like the fact that you can't do them both.
No, I agree with you, Mr. Chair. We already allow some concurrent actions that help to get to that first class. And among those are expedited reviews for certain high demand areas. Well, it turns out that a lot of the proposals we're getting now are specifically in those demands. And so that process is somewhat streamlined. Back this summer, when Dr. Roberts assumed the position, we made a number of proposals to streamline the process. A lot of the effects of those haven't yet been realized, but we've also continued with some additional ideas and have a task group that's working on that right now. And part of that task group met about a week ago. They've got an assignment that's due this coming Friday. And we're looking, before we get to our May 11th commission meeting, to have done exactly what you said, and that is to find places where we can squeeze the time out of this and shrink to market. In addition to that, we had a convening to just help institutions understand the process more completely about 2 weeks ago. And we had about 80 participants come, and we had presentations by campuses that had been notably successful in their program review process, talking about how that happened and what all they did in order to help the campuses as they face the challenges of completing the NAP and the letter of notification. So all of these ideas are in flow right now, and I'm very optimistic that what we're looking at is going to go a long way to help.
Thank you. Just along the lines, I had, well, I wouldn't call it a pleasure, but I had the opportunity to carry the Focus Act as it relates to the LGIs several years ago, where we stood up individual boards for these schools. And then, of course, I know UT has their board and their advisory boards for each of the institutions. I guess the question for me would be, as it relates to delivering new degrees and this new, more what I would consider concise or facility or campus delivered management, how does THEC feel, or what would be the value in not just allowing them more of an individualized approach, where from a funding and capital perspective and understanding of degree deliveries, particularly when we don't have geographical constraints anymore and the marketplace is so much more wide open? What are your thoughts about that? If we've really given them so much autonomy that they, quite frankly, didn't have 6 years ago, why not give them the autonomy to approve or manage their own business, if you will, by selecting and eliminating degrees that may or may not be a financial benefit to them or even good for the marketplace?
Well, what the Focus Act did was, in our view, was establish us as the umbrella to have oversight over those particular activities. Mm-hmm. And there was a reason for that. And I think it would be a real challenge, particularly related to interinstitutional issues associated with having that freedom not at least vetted in some sort of a way to assure the rigor of the program that's being proposed satisfies agreed upon standards. And here's an example of what I faced in my first month. an institution, when I went to visit, surprised me by saying that they're looking to expand their mission and have the intention of offering 50 doctoral programs in the next few years. And I found that to be very problematic.
Mhm.
Then who would oversee that kind of development?
That's a good question. That's why I was asking you. Obviously, that if TX's currently doing that kind of development, it would obviously be under your current purview. But on the other hand, is that for an institution who had the autonomy that delivered that to them through their advisory boards or local governing institutions, it would be masochistic in nature for them to do something that impugned themselves. Albeit we all make bad decisions in our own households every day that we get to regret in the future. But I do think that was part of the question, because then you don't go from a two, depending on the circumstance, 18-month to 2-year period, really, to as quickly as you can deliver it at that point in time. And so that was the reason for the question. It's not that we don't think that the process is currently the best or not working in the way that it is, but part of this hearing process is to be able to find better solutions that meet the current needs of the workforce. And so, and President Boyd, I'm going to let him close. I'll come right back to you.
All right. Now, there is an example of exactly what you have suggested, and that is if you're a TCAP, then your programs go through a separate and expedited process, and you can be up and running in a matter of a very short period of time, weeks. And Dr. Roberts and I visited campus just this last Thursday, in which we went up there because they were having a challenge, and we offered a solution to them that we'd abide by. And I left there having told the president, we can approve this in 30 days if you respond to the challenges that we've offered here.
Mhm.
So it is possible, and there is a way to individualize that within the protections that we feel are part of the approval process now.
Okay. President Boyd?
Yeah, Chairman Ryan, I just wanted to bring up one other variable that we haven't discussed. And I think it is important that we have this advisory boards or boards that provide us guidance. And we appreciate all the guidance that we get from THAC. But in addition, we have some other outside consultants that review each program as well. So it's not just up to the university by itself to create these programs. And Bernie can speak just briefly about those.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just share that each of our academic programs have different accrediting bodies and agencies that they work with as well, that provide outside standards, guidance, approval, review as well. So it isn't just our governing board, which is of course critical, THEC of course critical, but those outside accreditors also help us by assuring quality and speaking to standards that are really important across their disciplines.
So those obviously THEC has a reviewer, you have an outside auditor reviewer. I guess the question is maybe that an area where there's some redundancy? Do your reviewer or your auditing company, are they ever similar or exactly the same people who they do that THEC uses, or no?
I mean, there could be a chance that the outside reviewer is an accreditor and works with accrediting agencies, but I say likely they're different. Yeah.
But accreditors look at different standards.
Okay.
And one of the standards they don't look at is how does it meet the state's workforce needs?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a good point. I do think it's important. Obviously, if I do think it's a little bit disingenuous to say that the institution of higher learning, whatever it would be, would know best what the needs are of the workforce when the employer is contacting them first. It's not like they're picking up the phone and say, let's call Lou and figure out if we can do this. They're going to pick up the Tennessee Tech person there, whoever it is, and try to work at a system that works well for them. But I get that. I do. Yes, sir.
Well, funny you mentioned that, because Lou's got a point that he'd like to make with your permission.
Go ahead. Introduce yourself, Lou.
No, sure. Lou Hanneman with the Higher Education Commission. And I think you make a good point. Institutions are very good contact points for an employer to come and say, look, we need these types of graduates to come out of your programs, and then for an institution to be able to pivot in some timely way. But I think back to your earlier point about, well, why does this process reside at THEC in the first place? And going back to the Focus Act, and not just the Focus Act, but all the way to our inception. THEC is not charged with managing each institution's academic program inventory. We're charged with making sure that the entire higher education enterprise runs efficiently. One of the things about duplication of programs is oversaturation of the market. And we come up, and this is where that public comment period is so critical for institutions to speak into. Here's our experience with getting jobs for our graduates. You're about to onboard a new program identical to ours. Why? We can't provide jobs for all of our graduates. Why would we need to even further saturate the market? So I think that, when it comes to what our role is in all of this, each point where you see THEC's, interjection into this process, it's about two things. It's about accountability for, the viability of the program, the value to the workforce, because that is where the state's higher ed master plan comes in. Are these jobs going to allow students to walk with valuable paper to then be marketable? And the other piece is stewardship. Does the academic program have a business model that has sustainability wrapped around it? If you onboard a new degree program and it satisfies that immediate need of the employer, and then you don't really need the program any longer, what then is the next steps for that academic program? That's now a fixed part of your academic program inventory. So I just think it bears mentioning that there's this accountability side to this whole conversation.
Right. I do think too, though, it makes it a little bit of a challenge, because if you obviously THEC can recommend that they close programs, as it relates to doing that. And then under your example, if you had a program that had saturated the market and now it's not necessary, it still takes a long time to shut down a program too, whether it's through your own involvement or whether it's the school saying, listen, we're not making any money at this and no one's signing up for this degree. It still takes some time to really stop doing that, particularly when you have a few students who still may be in the pipeline. So I could talk about this forever, but anyways, I'm going to go to Chairman Baum.
Thank you, Chairman Williams. And I want to thank you all five and the people behind you for coming back to a second appropriations meeting. If I didn't know better, I'd begin to think you all like being down here. This committee is looking at reconnecting with students and recruitment in addition to capital projects. And I'm aware that THEC is involved with, locating students who have become disengaged, maybe due to COVID or other things, and getting them reconnected either as full-time students or part-time students or non-traditional students. And so I've got two questions about that. The first is, how many people do you have in charge of making these reconnections through the Reconnect program? And then maybe as a second question, I'll go ahead and ask it as a follow-up. How much of your revenue do you have allocated towards reconnecting with students?
Thank you for that question. So Lou Hanneman again with THEC. So we have a whole team on our staff. That's the Tennessee Reconnect team. And so we have what are called navigators. And these are embedded employees around the state. And we have how many? 15 current staff members. And again, these are embedded in communities. And so the role they serve is they are the entry point for what has become a holistic wraparound services. Now, I would stress, this was originally tied to, some grants that came in, and then again to the financial aid program, Tennessee Reconnect. But a key element here is that the students served here are not just Tennessee Reconnect eligible students. It's adult learners is what we're looking to do. And so, what they do when those students come into our navigators, they are then interfaced with the Department of Labor, with Department of Human Services. How do we kind of completely and fully wrap around, the types of services that an adult learner would need moving forward. And then we help them to pipeline into a post-secondary experience, whether that's completing the FAFSA, whether that's onboarding into a community college or a university program or a TCAT program, whichever they need, being able to find the prior learning credits that they have, at their disposal. If they were in the military, their MOS may have a whole number of credits associated with it. Is that
Yes, thank you. And as a follow-up to that, do you have an approximation of how much of your revenue is allocated towards those kinds of programs?
so? Initially, that program ran off a fixed.
Okay.
So we have two groups. We have a group of college advisors running off of a fixed pot of funds at Austin Peay, and those are embedded in high schools. And then we have the Reconnect side. And so, according to my colleague, we have about $1.5 million appropriated to those in any given fiscal year.
Okay, thank you all for being here again.
So just to follow up on that, the reason why they're located at Austin Peay is because they're more related to the Strong Act funding, or is it Reconnect money, or how does that work?
No, when we originally conceived of the solution, actually, now that I
Every
mentioned-
solution has a problem.
Right. When we initially tried to address the advising problem, what we did realize we needed to do was embed staff members in high schools. And at the time, the idea of adding, 30 to 35 FTE to THEC for that purpose, really in a pilot format wasn't, the proper approach. And so we worked with Austin Peay. They agreed to take ownership of the FTE, but they're managed out of THEC. And so it's been a pretty strong partnership. If the program has had any hiccups at all, it's really about funding. They have a fixed, they're on a fixed recurring amount. And over time, we've had a very difficult time growing that because they're not a part of our staff, and so when the state gets a raise or benefit costs go up, those costs don't trickle down. And so we've actually attrited some of the positions we had. I will say, just to a point of value of that program, when we did the college going rate report recently at the beginning of the year, one of the things we found was that the regions where you had these advised TN and Reconnect navigators, you saw a 5 to 10% difference in the college going rate to the positive. The work that they're doing, being able to actually be embedded in a high school, in addition to the guidance counselor. So let the guidance counselor do the guidance counseling, and then you have an advised TN person to do college advising and onboarding. It's made a tremendous difference. Our problem is we've had very little success in growing the revenue stream for that program. It was one of our legislative requests this year.
Yeah. I think that's great. I guess from my purview, my idea, albeit probably wrong, was that in Reconnect, we're trying to reconnect adult learners who may have began a degree and left, and then we're trying to get them to come back. I guess I'm missing the connection between a Reconnect program like that and that group being in a high school or trying to recruit high schools. So can you thread the needle for me there?
Sure, and I may have muddied the waters when Chairman Baum asked about the funding stream. That's generally part of one group in our agency structure. So the Tennessee Reconnect navigators are our 15 or so folks who are embedded in regions across the state.
Okay.
Their sole purpose is to marry up those adult learners who have some college, or in many cases no college, with all of the resources that they might need in order to pursue a post-secondary credential, and in many cases onwards to that employment phase afterwards.
Okay. How is it determined where those embedded people are located across the state, and how do they find out, or how do they recruit people in order to do Reconnect?
So we have several ongoing partnerships with the Department of Labor, and we also have a partnership with DHS, who are also embedded in all of these, in every county. And so, regionally, it's probably more of just about coverage and geographic coverage.
Mhm.
And so, they work with all of those local groups. They work with the post-secondary institutions who often have already a list of students who have left or stopped out for some reason. And so we do, go about some cold calls to re-engage folks. One initiative that we undertook on the tail end of COVID was when a person went in for unemployment. There was an option on that application to say, hey, but I am interested in going back to school. How do I get connected with a Reconnect Navigator?
Mhm.
That program ended up being pretty successful. And so, we are constantly looking for ways to partner with other agencies. We've trained DHS staff, we've trained Department of Labor staff to also be, kind of proxies for that navigator in their own offices. We've worked with local workforce development groups, WIOA, AJ, the American Job Center, groups as well. So we're kind of finding all of these ways to do it. Just the regional presence allows each of those to kind of really focus on maximizing the value of all the resources in any given area.
So if you had to guess, out of 15 embedded folks across the state, how many people did we reconnect through those 15 people utilizing the reconnect dollars? Any clue?
I don't know that number offhand. I can definitely get that to you. And it
Okay.
may, and maybe an even more telling, statistic would be, how many connections did we make and get people at least interested in a prospective roadmap back into higher ed?
Right. Of course, the main thing is not answering a question as much as it is getting involved, and so I think it's important. But if you can share with my office or
Will
Chair
do.
Leah Hazelwood's information about that office, we can.
Absolutely.
President Boyd, I just thought I would follow up. I know that your institution, I know Tech has their own folks as it relates to recruiting, retention, getting people in the door as it relates to schools. Tell me how it's different for you, I guess there, and what, how many people you think that are used in this process as it relates to enrollment and getting folks in the door.
Yeah, conveniently, I did ask all of our campuses to report back on how many people they have involved in things like enrollment management, financial aid counselors, recruitment counselors. And for all of us, it's a very competitive marketplace, and we have to be very aggressive. And so with our friends at MTSU and all of our LGIs, everybody's putting a huge commitment toward trying to recruit students. So at UT Chattanooga, we have a staff of 27. At the UT Health Science Center, which is a bit different, the extremely competitive people are coming to us. They have 8. At UTK, they have 336 people involved in recruiting. We have 17 at UT Martin, and we have 9 at UT Southern.
Well, okay, and so that would be this is where we're going out trying to get new students. So let's say you're an existing student, like I've got a junior in LGI myself. How do we retain those people? Are those individuals you just described at your institutions, are those there for recruitment and retention, or do you have a different group of people as it relates to retention?
Yeah, we have a different group of people that's focused on retention. There are some positions that do a little bit of both. Like we have something called a one-stop, where you could argue that could be both retention and recruitment. But when it comes to retention, here would be the numbers. At UT Chattanooga, 169. At the Health Science Center, 21. At UT Knoxville, 893. I could break that down if you'd like. UT Martin, 65, and UT Southern, 22. I will note that our retention rates at all of our schools have been going up dramatically over the last decade, and a lot of that's because of the commitments each of the campuses have made to making sure that our students are supported, and that's what these folks do.
Right. Do you have any? You may know the answer to this question, you may not, so it might be an unfair question. How many students did that number of people, how many students do you have across those 5 UT campuses?
Oh, well, it's about 56,000 students all across the system.
Okay, 56,000 students. But it's, I wrote the numbers down. It looks as if the recruitment staff to retention ratio is like 1 to 3. I mean, it's like you have 3 times the number of people working to retain students as you do to recruit them.
Yeah, I don't know that we've ever looked at that ratio, but I think it is true that while it's important to bring students to our campus, it's even more important to make sure they're successful once they get here. And so it's a primary focus.
Yeah, well, it's obviously really important, particularly when, you know, as we talked about in our last discussion, where THEC is helping us with Complete College Act, the formularies and things of that nature to reward those institutions that are performing well and retaining students and graduating students. I think it's really important, an investment in those. I don't none of the members. I guess this is just a committee of one today, but yes, Luke.
Yeah, I just
Lou?
wanted to follow up quickly on your question, and we'll get this entire document to you. But just I did get a hold of some numbers of in terms of our Reconnect navigators. So currently, we actually have 14 active Reconnect navigators. They are working with 6,700 active Reconnect students. Over the course of the program, nearly 4,000 have actually completed their post-secondary goals. In the month of March, our Reconnect team has had 5,908 points of contact with those active reconnectors. And year to date, that number is 93,562 points of contact. So that's, and that ranges from in-person, ongoing texting, emailing, and phone contacts with the reconnectors. And so it is a very high touch, one-to-one person engagement with those students.
Well, I just had want to switch roles a little bit here to kind of better understand. Could you, Director, could you share with me a little bit about what THEC's role is as it relates to student assistance and how that process works, and as it relates to financial aid, as it relates to your department? How does that work? I'm trying to figure out how many members or how many members of staff are utilized in helping get student assistance out to the different institutions.
Well, that is an entire division of THEC, the Tennessee Student Assistance Corporation. And so that manages all of those. I think there's 21 different scholarship or grant programs that are part of that management. And I would be quick to add that thanks to the very healthy support of the General Assembly, we have, I'm not sure that we've completely eliminated cost as being a factor of going to college, but we've certainly diminished it to the point where it is even more important to talk to people about the value of that post-secondary degree and get them back in the mindset that they are going to need something as post-secondary if they're going to be successful in having any kind of a meaningful career. So the financial part of that is, I think, incredibly well managed. We have a compliance division that's part of that helps assure that there is kind of a robust review of how that money is spent and delivered directly to the students.
So of THEC's involvement in student assistance, what percentage of those students receive or would, and of course this, you may not know the answer to this and have to get back to me, what percentage of students receive financial aid through TSAC outside of HOPE or Promise dollars? Do you have any clue what that is outside of TSAC?
How many receive financial assistance that's outside of TSAC?
Outside of HOPE or Promise, meaning monies other than HOPE or Promise dollars.
But still state money.
Yes.
Okay, because institutions have invested a small fortune in financial aid, and they should be applauded for the incredible work that they've done to step up and further close the affordability gap. That number, that'd be a little struggle to find out exactly how much those dollars are. The other dollars,
I have some approximate numbers. I'll just jump in real
Okay.
quickly.
Lou to the rescue.
No. So Lou Hanneman again with THEC and TSAC in this regard. And so we do have a number of state-funded programs that don't, draw down HOPE and or Promise dollars. So the largest of which is the Tennessee Student Assistance Award, and that is a regular recurring amount, around $113 million. And as you all very well know, it's only been in recent years that we've actually been able to serve all of the eligible students. We struggled for many years with only kind of the first come, first serve approach to that. In addition to the Tennessee Student Assistance Award, we also have the Dependent Children Scholarship. And I should say, for the TSAA award, that was 68,000 students receiving those funds. We do have a Dependent Children Scholarship. These are dependent children of persons who have law enforcement who have died in the line of duty. We do have a graduate nursing loan forgiveness program. As much as we've tried to kind of ease out of the loan forgiveness loan business, if you will, we do have two programs ongoing that still use that model. Then we have the Ned McWhirter Scholarship, which is a high academic achievement scholarship, which is also on a first come, first serve. It's a very competitive process. And so that is basically, we serve as many students as possible up to the amount of funded, which is right now about 1.4 million. But there are always students who are really in the upper echelon of academic achievement who don't receive awards. And then the Minority Teaching Fellows Loan Forgiveness Program, which is smaller, around $135,000 for 29 students. And then the last remaining students who are in our Tennessee Teacher Scholars Program before that program winds down.
Wow, that was way more information than I thought. I'm trying to write it down, but thank you. Thank
Can
you
also
very much.
get that to you in a bite size.
Thank you. Appreciate that very much. President Boyd, I did have a question. As it relates to your financial aid departments, could you tell us how they interact with TSAC as it relates to financial aid? Do they direct the monies? I probably should know this since I've one in school, but do they direct the monies to your financial aid department? And your financial aid department handles the rest of it, say any scholarships or monies or work study programs? How does that?
Well, as Lou mentioned, there is a lot of other Director Smith said there's a lot of institutional aid. Also, there's federal aid that we get, like from Pell. So
Mhm.
there's lots of other aid, and our people work as a coordinator to make sure, like, we have a one-stop where our students can have one aggregated point of contact. But I don't know the actual interactions between our people, and the folks at THAC. But I'm quite sure there has to be quite a bit of collaboration.
Well, we do the training. We do the audits. We work closely with them, particularly when they bring new staff on board to help with just sort of the onboarding of financial aid staff.
Okay, so I don't have anyone else on the list up here. I did have a few questions, obviously, more so than most, but I appreciate you coming back. Does anyone have anything else they want to share with the committee before we leave? If not, I want to say thank you guys for coming. We're really excited about what's going on. One of the best things we can do as members of this General Assembly is to make sure that we're functioning correctly and efficiently. Sometimes that means change, and sometimes that means not. And so I appreciate you and your departments and your flexibility as lots of challenges going on in the state this last couple of weeks. And so I appreciate your patience being able to come back and willing to come back whenever. I mean, I think that speaks volumes to this committee and to the House, and really appreciate that so much. So thank you very much for coming. And we're going to go back in session. Do the members have any personal orders, any questions? Seeing none, we will move to adjourn. Thank you.